September 5th, 1942, the night sky above the Solomon Islands burned with fire. The USS Gregory was sinking fast, explosions tearing through its steel heart. Amid the chaos, one man refused to surrender to the sea. Charles Jackson French, a Black Navy steward, wrapped a rope around his waist, tied it to a raft of wounded white sailors, and plunged into shark-infested waters. For 8 endless hours, he swam through the dark Pacific, towing men who barely knew his name. He saved their lives. Yet the world almost forgot his. This is not just a war story. It's a story about courage, color, and the silence of history. It was 1942, the height of World War II. The Pacific Ocean had turned into a graveyard of steel and fire. Japan's Imperial Navy was advancing across island after island, and America was still reeling from the shock of Pearl Harbor. Every ship, every sailor mattered now. Among the countless vessels patrolling those treacherous waters was the USS Gregory, a small destroyer escort converted into a nighttime patrol ship. Life aboard was tense. Sailors slept with one eye open, knowing the ocean could turn into hell without warning. Yet within this brotherhood of war, a silent division still existed, not between friend and foe, but between black and white. Segregation had followed the US military even into the Pacific, and within that segregated world stood a man history had nearly erased. Charles Jackson French, a soft-spoken steward whose courage would soon outshine ranks. Race and recognition. In 1942, the U.S. Navy mirrored the society it came from, deeply divided by race. African Americans were mostly restricted to service roles, cooks, cleaners, and attendants for white officers. They were called messmen, rarely allowed to touch a weapon or command a post. The idea of a black man as a naval hero was almost unthinkable. Back home, Jim Crow laws ruled the streets. Black soldiers could die for their country, but couldn't drink from the same fountains as white civilians. The hypocrisy was sharp, fighting fascism abroad while segregation thrived at home. For men like Charles French, the war wasn't just about defeating Japan. It was about proving worth in a system that refused to see it. Each battle, each act of service carried an invisible weight, the burden of fighting for a freedom not fully granted. And yet, amid those contradictions, some found their moment to defy history itself. Charles Jackson French was born in Foreman, Arkansas in 1919, raised in poverty, shaped by resilience. He enlisted in the U.S. Navy at just 18, long before the war began, seeking opportunity in a country that gave little to men of his color. Those who served alongside him remembered his quiet strength, a man of few words but fierce loyalty. The ship he served on, the USS Gregory, APD-3, was a converted World War I destroyer, small but fast, often used for nighttime patrols around Guadalcanal. Her crew was diverse, mostly white sailors, some barely in their 20s, and a handful of black servicemen relegated to menial duties. On board, racial lines were clear but rarely spoken aloud. Yet when the Japanese fleet attacked under the moonlit sky of the South Pacific, those boundaries would vanish in the roar of battle, and one man's courage would redefine what heroism meant. In early September 1942, the Gregory was stationed near Guadalcanal, supporting the Marines fighting to hold the island. The ship's crew had grown exhausted, constant enemy raids, tropical heat and sleepless nights. On September 4th, she joined her sister ship, the USS Little, on a midnight patrol. That night, radar was useless. Clouds cloaked the moon, and visibility was near zero. Suddenly, the silhouette of Japanese ships appeared on the horizon, destroyers with guns far heavier than the Gregory's. Within moments, the quiet sea exploded into chaos. Shells rained down. Fire tore through the decks. The ship's captain, Lieutenant Commander H.F. Richards, ordered abandon ship. In the panic, men jumped into the black water, wounded, bleeding, terrified. Sharks circled. The ocean carried screams instead of waves. Somewhere among them, Charles Jackson French tightened a rope around his waist and made a choice that would echo through generations. September 5th, 1942, midnight. The Pacific sky was lit by fire. The USS Gregory and her companion, the USS Little, had been spotted by a group of Japanese destroyers off Guadalcanal. Within seconds, blinding flashes split the horizon. The enemy's guns opened up, their shells whistling through the darkness. The Gregory took a direct hit. Her deck erupted in flames. Communication lines snapped and the ship began to list. Men screamed orders that vanished under explosions. Captain Richards gave the final command, "Abandon ship!" and chaos followed. Dozens leapt into the sea, clinging to life vests, wreckage, and each other. In the midst of this inferno, Charles Jackson French, a steward with no official combat role, jumped overboard, searching for survivors. He found a small raft carrying more than a dozen wounded white sailors. The ocean was thick with oil, smoke, and blood. Above, tracer fire streaked like lightning. And in that deadly silence between explosions, the real story began. The survivors clung to the raft, drifting in a sea that smelled of death. They were bleeding, burned, and half-conscious. French scanned the horizon. The Gregory was gone, swallowed by the dark. But in the distance, the faint outline of Japanese ships glowed against the fire. Then came the order from one of the wounded men, "We'll have to swim toward Guadalcanal." But there was a problem. The current was against them. The island was miles away. The men were too weak to move. French made a decision that no one expected. He tied a rope around his waist, looped it to the raft, and whispered, "Hold on." Then he slipped into the black water. Each stroke was agony. The ocean was thick with burning oil. His arms slicing through waves heavy with ash. Somewhere below, fins sliced the water, sharks. The wounded men froze in terror. French kept swimming, pulling them inch by inch towards safety. Hours passed. The moon vanished behind clouds. The sound of engines echoed, Japanese patrol boats still hunting survivors. One flare burst across the sky, turning the sea silver. French froze, barely breathing until the light faded. Then he swam again. By dawn, his muscles were tearing, salt burning his eyes. But when one of the men groaned in pain, French called out softly, "We're gonna make it." He wasn't swimming for glory. He wasn't thinking of medals or headlines. He was swimming because 12 wounded men, white sailors who might have never spoken to him on deck, depended on him now. For 8 relentless hours, through sharks, blood, and exhaustion, Charles Jackson French became what the papers would later call the Human Tugboat. As the sun began to rise, the sea turned calm, deceptively peaceful. The raft drifted closer to the coast of Guadalcanal, but enemy lines still loomed nearby. French's strength was fading. His hands were raw, his body numb. He had been swimming for nearly 10 hours. The men on the raft were delirious. Some whispered prayers, others simply stared. Suddenly, the sound of an aircraft cut through the silence. A US Navy seaplane had spotted them. The pilot, seeing the tiny raft and a lone swimmer towing it, thought at first it was debris until he saw French's desperate strokes. When rescue finally came, French collapsed in the water, his body trembling uncontrollably. The sailors were pulled aboard first. Then they hauled in the man who had saved them all. On the rescue ship, silence filled the deck. Those who had once looked at him as just another black steward now saw a man who had done what no officer, no hero had ever done. He had dragged life itself from the jaws of the sea. Later, when reporters came asking questions, the official story was brief. They called him a brave Negro messman. His name appeared in small letters. No photograph, no interview, no front page, but the men he saved knew the truth. Without Charles Jackson French, they would have been names carved on a memorial, instead of living witnesses to a miracle. The night of September 5th, 1942, began like any other aboard the USS Gregory. The destroyer ship drifted silently off the coast of Guadalcanal, its decks dimmed, its men weary after long hours of patrol. The air smelled of salt and engine oil, and from the galley below, faint laughter mixed with the hiss of boiling coffee. Among the crew was Charles Jackson French, a 22-year-old Navy steward. His job was simple: serve food, clean tables, follow orders. Nothing about him suggested hero. Not yet, but fate doesn't ask for rank. That night, Japanese warships emerged from the mist, their guns blazing. Within minutes, the Gregory was torn apart by explosions. Men scrambled across the deck, fire licking the night sky. French rushed to the wounded, pulling bodies through smoke and splinters. The ship groaned, twisted, then began to sink beneath the Black Pacific. In the chaos, French found a raft, small and fragile, already crowded with 15 wounded sailors, many bleeding, all terrified. The sea roared around them as the burning wreckage drifted away. Then came the worst sound, the hum of an enemy destroyer circling nearby. The Japanese ships were still out there, scanning the water for survivors. French knew staying near the wreck meant death. Without hesitation, he stripped off his shirt, tied a rope around his waist, and said the words the men would never forget. "I can swim. I'll get you out of here." He dove into the dark. The ocean swallowed him whole. Hour after hour he swam, muscles burning, lungs aching, eyes stung by salt. The wounded men clung to the raft, whispering prayers. Sharks circled. The moon vanished behind clouds. Every stroke was a battle between life and exhaustion. Somewhere in that endless night, one sailor called out, "French, you can stop now! You've done enough." But he didn't. He just kept swimming. 8 hours. That's how long he pulled that raft, through cold water, through fear, through everything the ocean could throw at him. He followed only one compass, the sound of distant gunfire from Allied ships far across the horizon. By dawn, he finally reached safety. The men he saved were lifted aboard an American vessel, pale, shivering, but alive. When asked how they survived, one sailor simply pointed at the exhausted man slumped on the deck and said, "That man, he's the reason we're here." But while his courage became the talk of the fleet, something else lingered beneath the glory. A truth as heavy as the ocean itself. Charles Jackson French was hailed as a hero by his crew, but not by his country. When the story of Charles Jackson French reached shore, it spread like wildfire through whispers and newspaper columns. Sailors spoke of a man who swam through the Pacific for 8 hours, towing wounded comrades with nothing but sheer willpower. The press called him the Human Tugboat. Headlines described him as a miracle. Negro swims through shark-infested waters to save white shipmates. But beneath those words, there was something uneasy. A reminder that even heroism was filtered through the color of a man's skin. For the white sailors he saved, French was a savior. For the Navy brass, he was a complication. The men he rescued begged for him to receive the Medal of Honor, the highest recognition in the U.S. military. They wrote letters, signed petitions, sent reports up the chain of command, but the recommendation stalled, buried somewhere in Washington's bureaucratic silence. Instead, Charles Jackson French received a letter of commendation, a polite thank you note from the Navy. Unsigned by the president, that was all. He returned home to a segregated America, an America that still wouldn't let him sit at the same lunch counter as the men whose lives he had saved. In Omaha, Nebraska, he was greeted not with medals, but with questions. Would he go back to work as a servant? Would he re-enlist as a steward? The same uniform that made him a hero overseas still branded him colored at home. Yet for a moment, his name flickered in the light. He was invited to speak at war bond rallies, to appear on radio shows, and to tell his story to children who stared in awe. Comics were drawn about him. The Human Tugboat saves the day, his face smiling under a sailor's cap. But soon the applause faded. America moved on. French struggled after the war. The trauma of that night never left him, nor did the feeling of being forgotten. Like many black veterans, he faced poverty, racism, and neglect from a nation that had taken his heroism for granted. He lived quietly, rarely speaking about what he had done. And when he died in 1956, at just 37 years old, few newspapers mentioned his name. His medals, his letters, his story, all faded into history's silence, but the sailors he saved never forgot. One of them once said, years later, if French had been a white man, he'd have statues in every city in America. That was the truth, the cruel symmetry of courage and color. A man who carried others through the ocean, yet was left to drown in the sea of racial injustice. For nearly half a century, the name Charles Jackson French drifted like a forgotten echo, lost somewhere between war archives and fading newspaper ink. America celebrated its victories, but forgot many of the men who made them possible. It wasn't until the late 20th century, when historians began re-examining World War II through the lens of race, that his name surfaced again. A Navy researcher stumbled upon a 1942 headline, "Negro sailor tows raft through shark waters, saves 15 men." The words seemed too cinematic to be true, but the accounts from survivors matched every detail. It wasn't myth, it wasn't folklore. It was a truth America had chosen to forget. By the 1990s, African-American historians, veterans associations, and journalists began demanding recognition. They argued that French's act wasn't just bravery, it was superhuman endurance. Swimming for nearly 9 hours through shark-infested waters, dragging men who once outranked him, all while knowing that the Navy he served still saw him as less than equal. For them, French's story was more than heroism. It was a mirror, reflecting the hypocrisy of a nation that fought tyranny abroad but tolerated segregation at home. Then, decades after his death, recognition finally began to take shape. In 2022, the U.S. Navy formally named a swimming pool at Naval Base San Diego after him, the Charles Jackson French Aquatic Training Facility. It wasn't a medal, but it was something, a symbol that history had finally remembered. Local museums in Omaha, Nebraska began curating his photos, letters, and interviews. Schools started including his name in lessons about unsung black war heroes. And every black veteran who heard his story saw in him something familiar, a quiet, unacknowledged strength. French became a symbol for the countless African-American servicemen who fought not only for their country, but for dignity in the face of hate. His courage stood beside that of men like Reuben Rivers of the 761st Tank Battalion, Doris Miller, and the engineers of the 95th Battalion, all of whom carried the double burden of war and racism. Today, when historians speak of him, they often say, Charles Jackson French didn't just swim through the ocean. He swam through America's conscience. His name has appeared in podcasts, documentaries, and educational exhibits about black contributions to World War II. In 2023, petitions circulated once more, urging Congress to posthumously award him the Medal of Honor he was denied in 1942. And though no official medal has yet been pinned to his name, the tide of history has turned. Modern readers, black, white, and beyond, now see his story as something larger than one man's act of courage. Because Charles Jackson French didn't just save his shipmates. He saved an idea that even in a segregated world, humanity can rise above hate. He swam in darkness, guided by nothing but faith and duty. And in that endless night, he illuminated what true heroism looks like, not medals or headlines, but sacrifice without recognition. The waves that once threatened to swallow him have now carried his story across generations. In classrooms, in museums, in Navy training halls, his name echoes like a long-delayed salute. He wasn't supposed to be a hero, one historian wrote. But history doesn't always ask for permission, and so, when we remember World War II, not just its generals and presidents, but its forgotten soldiers, we remember Charles Jackson French, the man who became a lifeline, a black sailor in a white sea of injustice who refused to let his brothers drown. He tied a rope around his waist, and in doing so, bound himself forever to the soul of human courage. He swam for 8 hours through sharks and hate alike, proving that true strength is not measured by medals, but by how much you're willing to carry for others.